All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're looking at sales strategies and the language of business.
Mm.
We've got a really interesting YouTube video that you sent us from the Coffee and English podcast to work with.
Yeah, this one looks at mastering English for business meetings, especially those focused on sales. They go through vocabulary and give some dialogue examples and even offer a few fluency tips. It seems like you might be preparing for an important meeting yourself.
Oh, could be a meeting where they're getting ready to pitch some big new ideas. Or maybe they need to have a tough conversation with a demanding boss, you know?
Could be. Well, let's jump in and see what we can learn. So the video starts off by introducing some key vocabulary, including the phrase drive sales.
So that's more than just making a sale, right?
Right, yeah. Driving sales is more about taking specific steps to increase sales. You know, real boost those numbers and make a real difference in revenue. It usually involves a mix of marketing and sales techniques and really knowing your target market.
Okay, and speaking of market, that's another term the video highlights. So in this context, what do they mean by the market?
Well, they're referring to the specific industry or sector that you're working in. You really have to understand how your market works, including who your competitors are, what the latest trends are, and how your customers behave.
Makes sense. So then the video moves into a dialogue example, sort of like a simulation of a really high-pressure sales meeting. We get to listen in as the team tries to come up with ways to, drive those important sales.
Yeah, and right away they emphasize concrete solutions. You know, they're making it clear that they need ideas that are practical and actionable, not just vague concepts.
And the tension starts to build pretty quickly, too. One person suggests they lower prices to match their competitors, but that idea gets shut down right away. They say it's not very creative and that it'll never fly with Swan. We find out later that Swan is this CEO.
And that phrase, that match the competitors phrase, is a really important one. It shows how important it is for businesses to stay competitive in their market.
But, just matching prices, that might not be the most strategic approach in the long run. It could even lead to everyone lowering their prices, which would hurt everyone's profits.
Yeah, for sure. The most successful businesses, they usually stand out because they offer something unique. Maybe they have innovative solutions or amazing customer service. They don't just try to compete on price.
Right, exactly. And then we meet Natalie, who suggests doing a promotion. It could be something like a 2-for-1 deal or a discount for a limited time.
Yeah, that's a pretty classic sales strategy. You know, you offer something special to encourage people to buy right away. Creates a sense of urgency.
But even that idea gets rejected at first, which I think tells us a lot about the company culture or maybe even the leadership style at play here.
It does make you wonder what kind of environment this is where good ideas are just dismissed like that.
Right. And then, almost on cue, the CEO, Mr. Swan, walks into the meeting. Natalie, looking a bit nervous, repeats her idea about the promotion.
Yeah, and this is where the dialogue gets really interesting.
Because Mr. Swan loves the idea, but instead of giving Natalie credit, he takes it and pretends it was his own.
Which tells us a lot about Mr. Swan's leadership style, and it's not very impressive.
Definitely not. He's not exactly someone who encourages collaboration or recognizes people for their work. Seems more like he's all about taking credit and showing everyone who's boss.
It's actually pretty typical of what you see with leaders who are narcissistic. They create a culture of fear and make people afraid to speak up.
Yeah, and that's the opposite of what you want in a good leader. A good leader should be motivating people, encouraging them to be creative, and appreciating their unique skills.
Exactly. A good leader would have praised Natalie for her idea and used it as a teaching moment for the whole team.
Instead, this whole situation kind of makes you worry about what it's like to work at this company and how Mr. Swan manages people.
It makes you wonder if this is just how he always acts, or if maybe this was just a one-time thing.
Good point. We're only seeing this one little glimpse into how things work there. But it does make you wonder. Imagine trying to come up with new ideas or do your best work in an environment where your ideas are either ignored or stolen by your boss.
It would be pretty demoralizing. It would probably kill any innovation or creativity on the team.
And this reminds me of the story about the Xerox Alto. It was a really innovative personal computer developed back in the 1970s.
Oh, yeah, the Alto was revolutionary. It had a graphical user interface, a mouse, all sorts of innovations that we take for granted today.
But Xerox as a company, they just didn't capitalize on their own invention. Part of the reason was that they were too afraid to take risks and their leadership lacked vision.
They basically missed out on a huge opportunity because they couldn't see the potential in the technology they had invented.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how many great ideas get ignored or shut down in companies where the leadership doesn't do anything to encourage creativity and innovation.
And how many talented people end up feeling discouraged and unappreciated? That can lead to lower productivity and people even leaving the company.
This is such a crucial point for anyone who's working in a business environment, especially if they're in a job where they have to come up with new ideas and drive results.
Absolutely. It's so important to be able to spot a toxic work environment and to understand what makes a good leader. Those are really important skills for anyone who wants to have a good career and be happy in their job.
So we've covered a lot of ground already in this deep dive. We've looked at key sales vocabulary, analyzed what happened in that tense meeting, and even started thinking about leadership styles and company culture.
And we've also touched on how important it is to encourage innovation and what can happen when there's poor leadership.
Mm.
But the video also has some really helpful tips on how to improve your fluency and sound more like a native English speaker. We should talk about those next.
Yeah, let's definitely dive into that. After all, if you want to succeed in business, you need to be able to communicate clearly and effectively, especially if you're trying to pitch those game-changing ideas.
So this Coffee in English podcast video, it does a really good job of pointing out some small but important changes you can make to your English to sound more natural and professional, especially in a business setting.
It's like they've found the secret formula for sounding confident and in control.
Yeah, exactly. One example they give is instead of saying, "I'll be there soon," you can say, "I'll be there any minute."
It's such a small change, but it really makes a difference. I'll be there any minute. Makes it sound like you're almost there already, like you're really on top of things.
Exactly. It shows you understand the little details of the language, and that can make you sound more sophisticated.
Right. And another example I liked was instead of saying something like, "We are thinking about a sales strategy," you could say, "It sounds like something we should consider."
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It's a much softer way of saying the same thing, and it makes it sound like you're open to other people's ideas. More collaborative.
Yeah, instead of sounding like you've already made up your mind, it invites people to join the conversation. It creates a much more welcoming atmosphere. Little shifts in the way you say things can make a big difference in how people react.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about creating a positive work environment. The words we use can really impact that.
You're so right. It's not just about getting your message across. It's also about how you say it. You want to show respect, encourage people to work together, and create an environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing their thoughts.
Exactly. And the video also mentioned a phrase that you hear a lot in British English. Instead of, "That's a great idea," they say, "That's a brilliant idea."
Oh, I love that one. Brilliant. It sounds so much more enthusiastic, It really shows that you appreciate the idea.
For sure. It's a way of expressing genuine excitement and making the other person feel valued.
It's like adding a little sparkle to your conversation.
I like that. And all these little tweaks, they can really help you build relationships and establish yourself as someone who is confident and well-spoken.
So we've talked about a lot today in this deep dive. We started with some key vocabulary for sales. We broke down that tense meeting, and we even got some tips on how to make our business English sound more natural and polished.
And we talked about the importance of good leadership, creating a positive work environment, and avoiding toxic workplaces.
And we saw how a leader like Mr. Swan, someone who steals other people's ideas and creates a culture of fear, can really hurt a team's creativity and progress.
It just shows that being a leader isn't about having a fancy title or being in charge. It's about setting a good example, empowering your team, and recognizing and supporting talented people.
And even though we can't always choose who our boss is or control everything about our work environment, we can learn how to handle these situations better.
Absolutely. It's so important to learn about different leadership styles, recognize the signs of a toxic workplace, and learn to communicate clearly and effectively. These are essential skills for anyone who wants to succeed in business.
Okay, so let's go back to a question we asked earlier. Have you ever worked with someone like Mr. Swan?
It's a good question to think about. And even if you haven't met a Mr. Swan exactly, have you ever been in a situation where your ideas were ignored or, worse, someone else took credit for them?
That's a tough situation to be in. It happens more often than we'd like to think. What advice would you give to someone who's dealing with that?
Well, it's tricky. You want to stand up for yourself and make sure you get credit for your work, but you also don't want to start a conflict, especially if your boss is the one who's not giving you credit.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to choose your battles carefully especially if you're not in a position of power.
Right. So one thing I would recommend is to document your ideas, maybe send an email summarizing what you said in a brainstorming session or keep a detailed record of your work on a project.
Like leaving a paper trail. That's a smart way to protect yourself and make sure there's proof of your contributions.
Exactly. And if the situation keeps happening, you might want to talk to a mentor at work that you trust, or maybe even reach out to HR.
Sometimes it helps to have someone who's neutral to talk to. They can help you figure out how to handle the situation, especially if it's a sensitive one.
And remember, you deserve to work in a place where your ideas are valued, your contributions are recognized, and your voice is heard.
And sometimes that might mean looking for a new job where you can really use your talents.
It's also important to remember that you don't have to have a fancy title to be a leader. We can all be leaders in our own way by working together, recognizing each other's strength, and creating a positive and supportive work environment.
Yeah, it's good to remember that we do have some control even when things are difficult at work.
Yeah.
We can stand up for ourselves, talk to a mentor or HR, and ultimately decide what kind of environment we want to be a part of.
That's a really important point. We often get caught up in the external stuff, like a tough boss or colleagues who aren't supportive, but we need to remember to build up our own inner strength and figure out ways to deal with those challenges.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into sales strategies and business English, what's the one big takeaway you'd like our listener to remember?
Well, for me, it's how everything is connected with language, leadership, and the overall atmosphere at work. Learning the ins and outs of business English will definitely make you feel more confident and help you communicate better in a professional setting, but it's also super important to pay attention to the bigger picture.
You're right. It's about being aware of those little hints in the way people talk, understanding the power dynamics, and recognizing different leadership styles. All of that can help us navigate tricky work situations much better.
And at the end of the day, it's about finding your voice, making a real contribution, and helping to create a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from figuring out sales terms to analyzing different types of leaders and even improving our business English. We've explored how important it is to encourage innovation, stand up for ourselves, and build a positive and supportive work environment. Hopefully, you've picked up some useful insights and feel ready to tackle the challenges of the business world with confidence.
It's been great diving into this with you.
Until next time, keep learning.